What's up, everybody? Welcome to Respect Our Authoritah, Wisecrack South Park podcast.
Respect my Authoritah!
My name is Jared, and I'm joined here with the original, complete Respect Our Authoritah team, the Authoritarians. We got Amanda.
Hey.
We got Ryan.
Howdy ho, everybody.
And in studio in Los Angeles today, we have Lux. What's up, man?
Yo, happy to be in this room.
Yeah,
opposed to
absolutely.
My bedroom.
Good to have you in person. So today we're breaking down South Park Season 23, Episode 3, Shots. As always, we're going to go around and get first impressions. What'd you think of this episode? Let's start with Ryan, the first-timer for this season.
Well, since I haven't been here before, I'll just give you a quick rundown on the other two episodes. I gave first episode pretty disappointing, honestly. Uh-oh, shit. Sorry. If anyone hears that, there's a construction site 50 yards away from me. Hopefully they're quieter from now on. But I give the first episode like probably a C-, honestly. I really was kind of disappointed. I was kind of tired of Tegrity Weed after that, and then when they started with it on the second episode, I was like, fuck. But then, massive improvement, because the China episode ruled, and now I like Tegrity Weed again, and that brought us to last episode, this third episode, and man, I think that they're hitting a stride. I think that I love these kind of South Park episodes where it's about pretty normal, like, kid stuff, like going to the fucking doctor and getting your shots. Everyone did that and screamed, and so I'm honestly surprised they haven't even tackled that before. So I love that they're going with like a mix of topical stuff with very universal things, and I think that they're kind of succeeding, at least in these second two episodes. I really love this episode a lot. What'd you guys think?
Cool. Amanda, what'd you think?
Yeah, I also really enjoyed this. For context, my parents are in town, so I was watching with my mother, who's never seen a South Park episode and doesn't understand how we can podcast about it because she thinks it's like a dumb cartoon. And she so thoroughly enjoyed it that I felt extremely vindicated, and I enjoyed it cathartically with her. I also just think it was really, really funny. Like every time Eric got naked and slaughtered himself with Crisco, I just was belly laughing for the first time I felt like this season. So I'd go with a solid A, which is incidentally also what my mother gave it. I asked her.
Wow, that's real bonding.
Yeah.
Lux, what did you think?
I guess I'm a little less enthusiastic than everyone else about this one. I really did like the Eric's a nasty little pig boy plot, but there are other stuff that I thought was just meh. So I'm going to give this one a B+. I think it was strong in some places, but other places kind of fell a little flat for me.
Yeah. I overall liked it. I mean, I'm in the same boat with Cartman's lathering himself in oil so he wouldn't be caught. I mean, all those scenes were so funny. I recently rewatched the episode where everyone is raping Indiana Jones, and they did the whole Deliverance thing. And you could tell Matt and Trey take a lot of inspiration from the Deliverance squeal like a pig with their ree sound. But yeah, I mean, so first of all, it's their 300th episode. Congratulations, South Park.
Way to go.
Yay!
Yeah. I found this, in terms of if it was trying to say anything, I actually found it to be quite confusing.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
I have all of these notes that mostly are just open-ended questions. I hope we can figure some stuff out today, but I did think it was funny. I loved the immunization roundup. I thought that Randy's discussion with Towley is for some reason, every time he says, I was acting like a towel, it's presented in a way that's so... You're just not expecting it, and it's just and yet it's really obvious, and it's just funny every time. I don't know. All right, so let's go into a recap. So Randy makes $300,000 selling weed to China, but nobody else is stoked on living out on the weed farm. Meanwhile, Cartman, afraid of needles and becoming artistic, refuses to get immunized and greases himself up and runs around like a pig if anyone tries to force it. So PC Principal has to kick him out of school, but Cartman claims the status of conscientious objector and weasels his way back in. Unable to tie Eric down, they call in the award-winning hog trapper Sweet Mesquite Murph. But not even he can tie Eric down enough to immunize him, so he has to call in some reinforcements and plan an all-county immunization roundup. Desperate and facing the pressure of a town calling her a bad mother for not immunizing her kids, and even kicked out of the house by her own son, Mrs. Cartman buys some weed from Randy to unwind. Randy and Mrs. Cartman commiserate about their families not appreciating their efforts. Randy apologizes to Towley for acting like a towel and vows to stop blowing up the competition and working with China. At the immunization roundup, Mrs. Cartman takes the needle for Cartman and becomes artistic. End of episode. So let's first start talking about the 300 episodes meta thing, because I feel like in some ways, in the last 2 episodes, we've always been asking ourselves, what is the actual relationship between there's South Park the town, South Park the show, and then there's Tegrity Farms, and when they say, so there's a part here where Randy says, is it me or are people starting to not be stoked about Tegrity Farms? And you can't help but think that that's Trey responding to perhaps some fans saying that they're sick of hearing the Tegrity Farms plotline. And
For sure.
Of course,
And Ryan.
Yeah.
Yep.
of course, with the 300 episodes thing, the $300,000, there's obviously the kind of 1-to-1 parallel between Tegrity Farms and the show. Where do you guys think this goes anywhere, or are they just kind of playing with it, or is there any real statement to be made about? So, for example, later Sharon says we've become exactly the kind of business we used to hate when referring to Tegrity Farms. Does that have any bearing on the show, or is that where the parallel ends?
I mean, I think it does, even if just in a small way. Like they seem so happy to be able to say fuck the Chinese government
Yeah.
and like rail against something in this way where like they sort of became like part of the cultural monolith in this way that made railing against stuff sort of feel disingenuous or like half-assed for a long time. And so now they finally have their chance to like
Yeah.
do that again, and I feel like they're very enthusiastic about that as a possibility in a way that they sort of haven't been for a little bit, which I think is very cool. And I think a lot of this episode, especially the 300 episode plot, which is for me where most of the stuff fell flat,
Yeah.
at least builds to this moment of like weird celebration of like yelling at China. And I think that that's what like Sharon's getting at, and like Randy with the towel, like they're just like sort of feeling like the show has become this cultural monolith, the thing that they used to hate, and now they can at least like be divisive in some way that's interesting and fun for them.
Totally. Like nobody's been like banned South Park in America for like a long time. Like, so it must be
Which
kind
I'm
of
always surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're sort of reacting to the fact that like when you get to this age in a show, like you're just not going to be as hot flash like Flashpoint.
Wait,
controversial.
Can we talk more about that? So you're saying that the show used to be. What is the distinction? I'm not quite
I feel
following.
like for a long time the show, like if you look at the 200th episode, right, where they like tried to do like the Prophet Muhammad stuff and they got censored, and there was that whole deal. Like that was the show sort of like reveling in how it was like we're transgressive and we're fucking with things and we're wild. And then I feel like in recent seasons it's felt less like that because it's South Park. This is what they do. This is their thing. And then the 300th episode, like going after China, that feels like a kind of risk that is like distinct from the kind of risks they were taking like recently and more in line with the risks they took earlier in the show's run.
So you're saying that the show has been able to rediscover its edge.
Yeah, at least somewhat.
Yeah.
Like they're going, I think that going after like a bajillion-dollar institution with billions of people involved, that's a huge government of a world power, seems like much more interesting to like much more their style than some other things they've tried to address.
They have a real enemy, like like the censors use, or like the parent organizations that were like decrying the moral decay because of South Park, like used to be their enemy, and now they have an enemy in China, which is like, as Luck said, like can't get much bigger than that.
Yeah, and that's I think spices them up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Randy at the end, when he's reconciling with Towley, he says, "This is the moment we get Tegrity Farms back on track." What can we expect from the future of the show? Having said that, if he's saying this is the moment we're getting the show back on track,
I think it might be a little more aggressive. I hope so. I mean,
Yeah,
I hope
that'd be
that
fun.
I hope the show gets a little bit more like going after things.
but were they? So let's take even 2 seasons back when they did the whole "put it down" thing, when they did whole seasons dedicated to Trump. What is different now that makes it more aggressive than then?
I feel like then they were. I mean, Put It Down is an exception. Put It Down was one that felt like really like in your face and like fuck you, this is the deal, and you're dumb for not understanding and engaging with the deal. But generally, I feel like they're just sort of like observing stuff. Like they don't always make huge points. When they do make huge points, they're sort of points that already kind of exist in the ether. Like that's why the China episode, I talked about this on the episode, was like so fucking sweet to me. Is that like that is a big problem that no one was talking about. And I feel like maybe they're going to try and find more of those, or find more ways to be a little bit more abrasive and like push the limits on like what they're allowed to say. Like nothing they've said in any of those other episodes, even Put It Down, was like a controversial position. It was just like
Sure.
a position that exists. Whereas like we've seen China's a controversial position. It's literally already cost the Houston Rockets $25 million.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm having a hard time buying this distinction because I think even like when they went against call out culture last year, I think that's as big of an abrasive risk as the Chinese government. I mean, I don't know how much money South Park makes in China now that they're banned in China. Maybe that's a big edgy thing for them, but I was even surprised that they were allowed in China in the first place when I heard they were banned. I was like, oh, I can't even imagine people watching it in China.
My interpretation was kind of the opposite of yours, Lux. Like, I think that they are a big part of the commentary is that they have become part of the culture, like you said, but then it's not that they now have this new breath of fresh air, this wind. Because I get, whenever I hear like Randy say, all right, now, integrity is going to start going off again. It's like, I take that as a cynical thing. Like, no, it's not, because you guys sold out. It doesn't mean anything anymore. No one gives a shit, because it's the 300th episode and y'all are just placating to China. But I don't really understand, because South Park is not placating to China. So it's not like they've sold out themselves. So I don't know if the one-to-one really works. But everything I take from Randy's mouth is, I think we're supposed to say, is bullshit and disingenuous, obviously.
I just thought this episode was sort of like a response. Like the end of this episode is supposed to be kind of a response to that. Like that's how we're supposed to read Randy up until the moment where he's like, fuck the Chinese government. And now we're supposed to be like, now Randy is truly integrity again.
Okay, yeah. At that moment, right. Yeah, like...
I think that's true. I also think it's narratively confusing because I was really on
Yes.
board with Randy as the representation of like corporate America and like the falsity of brands trying to be authentic when they really are just like mega and not real about real people.
Yeah, that was kind of the thing that I came up. So Towley at the end, he says, stop blowing people up, stop having to stop working with the MedMen guys, and stop trying to placate China. And I was trying to think if there is any meta context here, who is this accusing? And I was thinking if it was, just the general social order of today, maybe Towley is saying, in the first episode, stop blowing people up instead of helping the interned. And then as far as the MedMen thing, though, I don't know. That I don't know.
He's standing in for any corporation or business in America that's trying to, work with China, basically.
Well, yeah. So the China point definitely makes sense. Stop making media to placate China when they're obviously bad.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the thing, right? Is that like Ryan said, I think they stand in for like most corporatism generally, and they're putting themselves in that position, and then being like, now we can draw a distinction between ourselves and other big corporate entities, because big corporate entities like the NBA and Disney, etc., they all placate China. But us, we say fuck the Chinese government on TV.
Well, importantly, they placate China while still embracing this term progress, when obviously, if you're placating China, who has some laws that are very not progressive, like having work camps and stuff like that, that's as much of a hypocrisy as Randy selling Integrity weed and being a hypocrite. But
and remember, the only reason part of the reason he's saying he can even do this is because even the PC babies don't even seem to mind about this, which is interesting.
Yeah, but I just don't
That's one of my favorite jokes this season.
But I just don't see South Park the show as one of these people or one of these corporations that is also claiming to be progressive or selling themselves under the mantle of being forward-thinking and inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, like, even if they're not doing that, that's just sort of the way that, like, culture positions itself. You know what I mean? And, like, they're just sucked into, like, the broader zeitgeist in some way or another. Like, they're part of the conversation.
I don't actually feel like Integrity Farms can like exist with integrity because it never did. Like even from the beginning, it was a joke that Randy's now suddenly a farmer because that's more profitable. So I feel like either this was just like a one-time gag so they could say fuck the Chinese, and he's gonna go back to being like a non-integrity farmer, or he's gonna like have to shut down the farm. I don't know.
God damn, Amanda, are you telling me you don't think integrity has integrity? You better. Those are fucking fighting words, motherfucker.
I'm gonna stand by it, man. Yeah.
Fuck.
So in this distinction between South Park Integrity Farms, do you think do you think then that Tegrity Farms is a kind of thought experiment of like, what would it be like if we, South Park the show, tried to kind of go good like other entertainment does, try to be more progressive, try to, have the same morals or supposed morals that other shows do? This reminds me again of that episode when Stan turns 10 and he says, all right, I'm kind of tired of doing this. I'm going to take a left turn.
Yeah, well, I think that it's more. I don't think that would happen because I think that they feel very strongly, like I'm saying, that they're distinct from those other things.
Yeah.
But I do think that they've kind of reached a point where like the shitty things about society are shitty things within their worldview too. Mm-hmm. Like it's not the same kind. Like it's just like things have lined up. They're like, we also don't like plutocratic oligarchy and like worker exploitation, etc. Mm-hmm. And so it just happens that like the things South Park thinks suck are the things society thinks suck, and so now they can sort of go good, as you say, without really trading off any of their like core ethics.
Oh, see, I'm saying that, but them going good if Tegrity Farms is a thought experiment of them going good, that would always be inauthentic, and that's why Randy is such a hypocrite. He has no integrity as such.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe that's what it was. Is that like they tried to go good with Tegrity and some other stuff and do this critique and realized kind of that the truest way to do their thing is just to be themselves, which happens to align in this way with like a lot of progressive positions, like Free Hong Kong or whatever. I mean, I guess that depends on what kind of progressive you are, but generally Free Hong Kong is a good position to take. And like I think that they've run into a spot where like they can just be like, this shit sucks, and it's like, oh, that shit does suck, because these days most things suck.
Yeah,
so they have
sure.
like a lot of shit to talk about in a way that's really promising for them. But I think you're right that they can't just be like, we are forward-thinking bastion of progressivism, because like they're not. That's not what they do. It's never been like what they're about. And I think if they were to position themselves that way, and when they do position themselves that way, it does read kind of disingenuous in a real Randy Tegrity kind of way.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. That makes sense to me. Anything you guys want to add before we go into the immunization plot?
Why was $300,000? Like, I mean, I understand. Why wasn't it $300 million? Like, it's just it's such a weird joke to me that it was like this amount of money that like couldn't buy a house in North Austin. You know what I mean? Like
one transaction. That's pretty good.
Was it? But was it like that's what I didn't understand. Was it like one transaction, like a cumulative moment?
I would. I don't know. I mean, $300,000 is still a lot of money to me.
No, for sure, it's a lot of money. It just seems like for the size of that farm.
Yeah. Well, I would assume it was just one transaction, because at the end, Tally says you have to stop doing business with China, suggesting that then, there's still money to be made by continuing this business relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I was looking throughout this episode just for stuff about the NBA thing, because it's just blowing my mind how much they nailed that. And there wasn't really anything super specific to that, which kind of bummed me out, because it felt like I honestly thought on like Friday that this episode they were just would trash whatever they were planning on and would just double down on China because it had gotten so hot and they had nailed it so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they just kind of like took a second to be like, hey, fuck China. And anyway, we're talking about Pig Boy now. Which like, I don't hate that, but it was a little bit of like, oh, I thought we were going to get into some weird shit.
Yeah, the only thing I have left to say is fuck the Chinese government. Bring it on, China!
All right, so the immunization subplot, correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably one of the most substantial arcs that Mrs. Cartman has ever had.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's up there. There's a couple. There's like the dog trainer one is another one that's very similar.
I watched that one recently, but even then she doesn't have a breakdown like this. She doesn't
Yeah.
have these really introspective moments.
No, this was the most like Leanne-centric episode, I think, maybe ever.
Definitely. And it was very like, you never think about what it's like to like raise Cartman from like an empathetic point of view, because he's just such a caricature. But you're like, wow, that would suck.
Especially as a single mom.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Was there a certain point in the series where they stopped making Cartman's mom as a whore jokes, or did they just gradually decide to stop telling that joke? There was nothing in the lore that made it so that she's not a whore anymore, right?
No, I feel like if there's any part that stands up, it's the 200th episode where they like discover that Scott Tenorman's dad was Cartman's dad.
Okay.
And kind of like wrap that story up, and then they're just sort of like, and we're done with this whole thing.
Okay.
I don't know if that's, I can't say that 100% is true because I haven't like done the research, but that's like to me the jumping off point, like the flip point.
Yeah. So one of the funniest things about this is that Cartman and Mrs. Cartman have to read their beliefs off of a sheet of paper that Cartman has written in crayon. Yeah, I love it when he says, "Look, everyone, I have religious, ethical, or moral beliefs." And that when Mrs. Cartman is in the PTA meeting, she says, "I have strong beliefs that vaccination may contain harmful ingredients such as formaldehyde, aluminum, and even mercury. We can't even take a 1.1% chance of vaccinations making our children autistic." And then everyone says, except for Token, says conscientious objector wrong, and of course artistic instead of autistic.
My dad actually like wandered in during that joke, and he said that that's a Rain Man reference.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The artistic one?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That checks out. That seems like the kind of
Yeah.
that seems like a
Not going to swear by it, but I kind of trust my dad on that.
Hey, when the townspeople sneak into the house to give Cartman the shot, it seems like it's a reference to something that I'm not getting.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it felt a little bit just like any given like possession movie sort of situation, but I can't think of anything specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was like the show Intervention, but my girlfriend said, no, they just have people sitting on a couch and waiting for people to come home.
Yeah, that checks out.
In my mind, I was like, is this the theme to Ad Astra? But it wasn't. It was not.
Okay, let's talk about the big unexpected thing that this episode does is that Cartman's mom ultimately decides not to have Eric immunized, or that if it is going to happen, it's going to happen on her own terms. What did you guys think when Cartman takes the needle or Mrs. Cartman takes the needle for her son?
Oh shit! Where's this gonna go? I mean, I don't think they're definitely not like condoning that. I think that they're just saying, all right, this is gonna be her arc. She's a hardcore anti-vaxxer now, and it's gonna go somewhere.
No, I don't think she's an anti-vaxxer. I think that it's ultimately about parental responsibility that they're doubling down on. And she still wants him to get vaccinated, but only on her own terms.
Right. But I
Yeah.
mean, like, some people would say, all right, what's the fucking difference? You know, like,
Totally.
yeah. So, I mean, whatever her terms means is kind of the main thing. But right now, everyone's like, you know, their kids are gonna get sick.
Yeah, I did like that they kind of treated vaccination, good, bad, as like settled case law. Mm-hmm. Like whenever they had people like even be like, well, there is a possibility it's bad, then like Mesquite Murph would just be like, actually, here's like a bunch of statistics or
Right,
whatever.
totally.
So that I liked about it, that they kind of tried to like hand wave the like, of course we think kids should get vaccine. This isn't really about that question per se. It's about like the parent-child relationship and all of that.
Yeah.
I did appreciate that because it was just sort of like, why would we even relitigate this? Like, it's been like 3 years since this was like a serious like thing that was a discussion that we had to solve.
Well, I really love the fact that you know, once they decide, okay, he needs to get vaccinated, and then they're like, all right, we have to force him, I guess, and then he doesn't do it. So then they're like, what do we do now? I like the fact that it really is presented as the real problem as, all right, if a kid's not going to get vaccinated, how do we force him? Can we at all? And is that right? I mean, like, all those are pertinent questions, and yeah, I like, what do we do now?
And also, I feel like the rodeo metaphor is like mocking the media frenzy around like unvaccinated kids. Like that, like media corporations are like definitely like profiting from people's like hysteria about the issue for sure.
And specifically of shaming parents.
Yeah.
Shaming parents that haven't immunized their kids. The arc or whatever, the big distinction seems to be that at the beginning, after Eric evades being vaccinated, he says, "Mom, can I still get a toy?" And she's like, "One toy, Eric." And then at the end, when she saves him from being immunized at the roundup, she says, "No shot, no toy." And then it cuts to Cartman being in the waiting room of the doctor's office ready to take his shot. But did you guys really believe that it would be different, that Eric wouldn't start squealing again once the needle's taken out just because his mother's withheld toys from him?
I kind of just figured it was going to be his mom's artistic now. Like, once she got the shot in the butt, I was like, well, this is where this is going.
Honestly, my brain did go there, Jared, because that was a strong choice. You know, she finally, that was her little bit of her arc, that she'd kind of learned a little bit of self-control and giving him presence. But then yeah, when it hard cuts to him being obedient for a second, I mean, obviously you're kind of like, all right, you know, he's obviously an evil kid and not really obedient, but it was a juxtaposition enough to where you're like, what are they trying to say? Did he learn something, you know, in the time that's passed between the cuts? But then of course now they're about to go into Cartman's mom's autistic, so of course he's not going to get shots anymore.
Yeah, is that the thing, right? That's something I was wondering after the episode. Is like the bit gonna become that like Cartman's mom becomes one of these like artistic hippie moms who doesn't vaccinate their kid because that's just like their weird deal?
I don't know. I was actually hoping that it just becomes a joke that Cartman's mom all of a sudden becomes this artistic genius or something like this.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
the implication is just that like artists are annoying because like they can be.
Yeah.
I feel like why I really liked this episode is because like I felt like the core wasn't really about like politics or like South Park taking a stand. Like it was very rested in just like human emotions and parents struggling about how to like take care of their families and still be good people.
Right, like the Leanne or Andy scenes had like some real fucking pathos
Yeah,
to
for
them.
sure.
Yeah, what she says is still something that is a little bit confusing. I mean, basically the attitude that she comes to that allows her to go back to the immunization roundup and save Eric is she says, sometimes when we're afraid of being judged, we push our family away. And so I watched this episode twice, and the first time I watched it, I guess I thought that if I was Mrs. Cartman, I really would not feel guilty for having all these townspeople come into my son's room in the middle of the night to try to immunize them. But apparently she really did. Because Cartman is just very manipulative. He's one of the most manipulative characters in television history. So if he tells her, you know, Mom, you need to leave the house because you betrayed me and you did this horrible thing to me, I don't really think of that as him actually going through any genuine suffering. It's just him being a dick like he always is. And yet she seems to really feel horrible for what she did. And that leads her to take the needle for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of it is that, like, her whole thing is, like, protecting Cartman from the world, whether it's, like, for better or worse. And, like, she definitely feels like she failed in that in this way. The same way that, like, I mean, it's like her and Randy both have this thing where they're like, I was just trying to do the thing that I assume is best for my family, and I should know because I'm the family person. And then they have different realizations. Like, Randy's like, oh, maybe I was being a dick. And she's like, I need to protect my son at all costs.
Yeah. She I'm sorry,
No, go
keep
for
going.
it. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just saying that she is, you know, representing the true believer anti-vaxxer that is like, look, you know, like my kid is crying when I give him these shots. He obviously doesn't like it. I need to do what's right for him. I'm just looking out for my kid. Like she's taking that, and yeah, and obviously your kid is 2 or 3 years old and going to tell you that they don't like shots because they hurt and they're boo-boos. So,
Wait,
you know,
but is that a real thing?
It's not necessarily smart to listen to them.
Is that a real thing? Are parents anti-vaxxers just based on the fact that they don't want their kids to have needles?
I feel
thought that
like
was
that's
a
South
joke.
Park parody.
Right, that's
for
South Park
sure.
parody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Like they always make the joke that people come up with like intellectual excuses for something that is like actually just emotional with like
Okay.
So I feel like yeah, it's a parody.
But I guess my question is, do we identify with Cartman's mom's arc that she feels bad for allowing the state or the community to do something to her son? Because I feel like I just didn't follow her on that.
Yeah, I mean,
I absolutely see where she's coming. I mean, like, honestly, like it's. I mean, I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all, but you know, it is one of those like gray libertarian areas. Like, how much of is the government allowed to tell me what to put into my kids and me? You know, it's like I get the concern, but at the same time, it's like, you know, when you have such determined science that it really does have an externality of affecting everyone else, I feel like there's, you know, it makes sense to have a law to do it. But I sympathize with her predicament.
And this makes sense when it comes to general South Park lore. If you go back to the South Park movie, it's all about how the responsibility to make sure that your kids behave, it isn't on the media, it isn't on the government, it's on the parents. And, you know, all with Blame Canada, the whole thing, even the last lines of the song are, we must blame them before somebody thinks of blaming us. And, you know, South Park, back when Columbine happened, everyone was blaming them for because I guess the kids were big fans of South Park, and that was, you know, the beginning of a huge wave of people criticizing the media for violent things happening. And I guess maybe South Park or Matt and Trey had this thing where, like, well, if we do say that it's the state's responsibility to do something to a kid when the parent can't do that, it's kind of hypocritical of us because that's the same state that we would not trust to make sure that they don't interpret media incorrectly and get violent or determine what media that you watch. So to me, it makes sense that they would do this, and it was effective in that it was shocking because I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense from like their intellectual angle. It's just hard to like dramatically empathize with the character because it's just sort of like, we know Cartman, right? Like, we know Cartman's like a whiny little manipulative shit boy. And like, who even, like, I mean, I guess him turning into a nasty little pig freak is authentic or whatever to him. But like, even so, he's like constantly manipulating his mom. So the idea that like she's worried about like his sincere suffering or whatever. I mean, that's always been the dichotomy of Cartman's mom and Cartman, is that Cartman's like manipulative and always lying, and Leanne's always sincere and very like earnest.
Yeah.
But it just like, it was hard for me to dramatically empathize with her because it's just like, you know, your son's kind of a piece of shit, and like he's always trying to get out of things that help other people because he's a piece of shit. So like, you shouldn't feel bad that he's doing the thing he always does. Like that just happens all the time.
Especially when Cartman, the biggest anti-Semite in the show, claims to be an Orthodox Jew in order to not get vaccinated.
Yeah, exactly. Like it just sort of feels like you gotta. I don't know. I just never like was able to really get down with her position. Not like intellectually, I get it. Like I get the like concern with like regulating bodies and whatnot, but it was just like, it's fucking Cartman. Like, you know how your kid is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was treating her like a real person, which they like have rarely really done with such like depth. Like the real struggle of like what it must be like to raise Cartman and want to be a good parent must be like, that would be tough.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just kind of hard to like, I guess for me, and maybe this is just because I watch a lot of South Park and it's all like becomes a continuity, but like of all the fucking Cartman things, do you know what I mean? He's like, I don't want to get vaccinated, but like, think of all the other times he's like made up bullshit to get out of things in like nonsense ways. And like, this is the one they choose to like go in on her with. But I think you're right. Like, it is good to get more depth on Leanne. And like, I think that one thing I've liked about later seasons of South Park has been that they've like fleshed out a ton of characters in cool, interesting ways. And she definitely earns it in this episode. But it was just like hard for me to be like, it didn't feel like, I just like was never like cheering for her, if that makes sense. Like even though she was on this arc and growing, which is like a classic place for you to be like, hooray, the character's doing a thing. I never really got that because I was just like, what are you?
Just
It's fucking just vaccinate this kid. I don't care if he makes deliverance noises. Like just put a fucking needle in it.
Yeah, the thing that's hard for me is that because, and this is basically what you're saying, like because Cartman is such of this like trickster character, it's impossible for me to believe that anything that she does, if she's a stricter parent, will actually make Cartman want to get that shot, which is why even when he's supposedly sitting obediently at the doctor's office, I'm like, yeah, but we assume that he's gotten that far before.
Totally.
You know, he had to sit in the waiting room before when he started freaking out as soon as the needle came out. So if the episode was trying to convince us of this arc of like, okay, she was a permissive parent and then became a stricter parent, and that allowed her to get her kid immunized without bringing in the state, then it's just difficult to do that when Cartman, such a character of chaos, is in the mix.
Yeah, but man, I just got like, this season I think has been a big jump up in animation. Just speaking of Cartman, like I really liked the way they animated Cartman in pig mode.
Yeah.
I thought he looked great. There are also just like little tiny details of like the animation that were great. Like when his mom's reading the note in the gym, you can actually see the crayon writing matching the words that she's saying. Like it's written out, like little details like that, which I like really love because it makes it so much easier to get super into the world when everything looks good. Because like sometimes you'd have episodes where like things just like look like ass, and then you're just like, well, now I don't want to look at this anymore. But this whole season I thought has like been animated in such a cool way, and like the Cartman pig shit was just like such a good example of that. Like the way they'd like scrunch up his face weird and then like have him run around, like kick up little clouds of dust and like, I loved it. I loved that. Was whatever else about this episode taking issues with stuff. The fucking Cartman pig boy sequences were all fucking like, mwah, so good.
Yeah. All right, guys. Anything else you want to bring up before we go into the mailbag? Thank you. All right, we're going to do a couple voicemails first. You can hit us up at 213-534-8807 or 21-ELFGUT07. We got one from Anonymous.
This is for the Respect Your Authority podcast. Bob in Los Angeles calling. I just want to say it's wild to think about how South Park has changed in the last 20 years. Back when it was on TV, it was the worst thing on TV. No nutritional value. And now banned in China, it was sobering. It made me realize, wait a minute, money has corrupted our government, it's corrupted big business, it's even corrupted media. And so this really important story isn't being told by anybody but South Park? It just adds to the whole upside down world we're in now. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, this is a realization I've come to in my life too, is that oftentimes there are messages that no one else is going to say except South Park.
Yeah,
For sure.
I mean, that's why.
Well, hold on a minute. It was not shitty back in the day. It's always been great. Let's put that out there.
Yeah, that I also agree with.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
like, a lot of my favorite episodes are from like the first 3 or 4 seasons. So like, I don't know if I agree with that part of it, but it is cool. It is cool to see South Park like taking on things that no one else is taking on. Like that's why the PC Babies joke was so good to me.
Yeah.
But honestly, fucking man, it really boggles my mind, and they kind of commented on this on the episode about how is this not a unifying issue for the right and left in America, in my opinion. I mean, like it, you know, just it seems so obvious. But for some reason it's not being.
Thing?
The what?
The China
yeah, the
thing?
China thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like the how freedom of expression is so valued in this country, and we're allowed to say, you know, people say crazy opinions about all sorts of subjects, but the second you basically offend a large portion of the China, or quote unquote offend, because you say something about the Chinese government, that's an issue all of a sudden, and we're not supposed to talk about it. It's so obviously hypocritical, and yeah. Fuck yeah for South Park taking that.
Well, how
on.
much commentary do you think there is in the line when Randy says, "You guys having a problem with China is racist"?
I love that line because I think that there's a lot of commentary, because I do think that there's kind of a little wishy-washy, whereas some people would jump at certain issues. The fact, let's be honest, like people are, they see it as this ethnic group that they're not necessarily allowed to criticize whether they believe in it or not about how they're, what's going on across the world over there. But it takes nothing to say I like freedom. I feel like that's something that we can all agree on. But I guess if you're saying that and offending a country that you're not a part of, people get weird about that, and so that's where I think that line comes from.
Yeah, you definitely hear a lot more outcry about like fascism in like Europe than you do about like oppression in China, because of like the media landscape.
Yeah, and that's niche fascism. That's like groups, which is obviously you want to be worried about. But this is a whole fucking machine that runs a country, of 1 billion people, of like a sixth of the world's population. I mean, it's apples and oranges too.
Yeah, I mean, it's very telling in the context of like the NBA conflict with China, which I've been following very closely as a former basket blogger. But like it just came out recently, like there was like the NBA basically put out a statement that was like, we think free speech is good, but also we think China is fine because we love the Chinese, but also free speech is good. And it was like some word salad bullshit. And the Chinese government responded by basically being like, we think free speech is fine too, but speech that like challenges the sovereignty of a nation controlling its territory does not count as free speech. And it's like, well, then what the fuck does, dude?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, like what possibly would? And like there's this kowtowing towards it, and like we've been watching the NBA do it all week, is like fucking bonkatronic, because like everything in America talks about the values of like free, like Ryan was saying, we talk about free speech all the time as this like Central American value, and whether or not we're doing it right here is not really relevant. What matters is that like it's idealistically a thing that we believe in, and like then we're just giving billions of dollars to a like weird plutocratic like fake communist government that is like just refuses to engage with it. And it's wild to me that it's not. I mean, I'm glad it's becoming a catalyzing thing, but it's crazy that it wasn't before.
All right, we got one more. Let's do one more from Jessica.
Hi, Wisecrack. This is Jessica from Eva, Alabama, calling in for the Respect My Authoritah podcast. I'm sure a whole bunch of people have already called in and mentioned this, but you guys were talking about banned in China, and we're wondering if there was any connection to the biopics and the censorship in China. And specifically, the last two that have come out in the last couple years or year is Rocket Man and Bohemian Rhapsody, both of which a huge shitstorm was caused because apparently Bohemian Rhapsody was almost a completely different movie in China. And have seen Rocket Man. I haven't looked up and looked into it, but based on the fact that there's a sex scene in Rocket Man, a gay sex scene, I would assume that is also taken out. So there a lot of the gay community was really upset because Bohemian Rhapsody apparently was seen in China as if they weren't gay at all. So that's kind of the connection they were looking at, especially with the no gayness comment. So yeah, just wanted to fill you guys in on that little nugget there that I wouldn't have even thought about if you guys hadn't asked the question. Love the show. Thanks so much.
I didn't know about that.
Hey, good
That's
catch,
a
Jessica.
Really good point. Very interesting tie-in.
That sounds like a really hard re-edit. I wonder what the movie is like.
Yeah,
Is it just a concert movie where it's just, hey, this is good music?
That's funny too, because the editing in Bohemian Rhapsody is famously so bad, but Oscar-winning.
Yeah,
so
tragically
I wonder,
awful.
Yeah,
I haven't been following this very closely, but I know that they change posters a lot. Like I remember when The Force Awakens came out, John Boyega's face was very big on the U.S. poster, but they made it really small and just in the corner because I guess the Chinese don't like black people. So they just made it seem like he's a very minor character in the Chinese poster. But I don't know if they actually recut the movie in that case. But I'm sure when it's smaller movies, there's probably less at stake. And it's just like, sure, we'll see if this movie has hopes of breaking even or making a profit by re-editing it and sending it to the Chinese.
Well, I mean, they do have big movies too, right? Like I remember reading somewhere that like there are Marvel movies and stuff where like we see side characters, like scientists or something, who's like a Chinese actor. And then in the Chinese cut, that guy has like 4 scenes with Robert Downey Jr. Like this.
Oh, really?
Like I don't know if that's exactly.
It's Fan Bing Bing.
Yeah,
is her name. And there's about 45 minutes of Transformers 4 or something that takes place in China that's not in the American cut.
wow.
Yeah.
And I think they have like.
See, I thought it was in the American cut, and they just had this stuff that was in America, but still basically for the purpose of placating the Chinese. I didn't know there were separate cuts.
No, yeah, they have separate
It's
cuts
extended for sure. You know, I had heard about the Bohemian Rhapsody thing. I'd never seen it. Maybe they added a scene where they're like, Freddie, why are you sick? And he's like, don't worry about it.
Just a cold. Anyway, I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. All right, let's go into the regular mailbag. You can hit us up at southpark@wisecrack.co. Any comments, questions, whatever. Lux, what you got?
All right, so this first one is from Wen, who says, hello from Canada. As a Canadian born in Chinese mainland who spent half my life in China and half in Canada, I confirm that the Chinese spoken in the Banned in China episode is not only good, but likely done by a native Chinese speaker, except when Randy and Mickey were speaking Chinese. In fact, I found it very interesting that in an episode so critical of China that went through the trouble of finding native Chinese speakers, it kind of reminds me of the idea that you should be focusing your criticism on the country and not the people. So by having the Chinese speakers speak proper Chinese, it is almost a sign of respect for the Chinese people while shitting on the Chinese government. If anything, Mickey's Chinese was horrendous and unintelligible. So they're also shitting on the corporations who cave into China. What do you guys think? Love your show. No such thing as overanalyzing art. Look forward to seeing what's to come. Cheers, Wen. I thought that was really interesting because we were talking about whether or not the Chinese was accurate last time. So
yeah. Well, I recently rewatched the Wing episode. Remember with the City Walk guy's wife, who's the famous singer, and all the Chinese in that is just, you know, like all just nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that Wen made, that like because they were being so hypercritical of one aspect of China that like they would take the care to be not offensive in other ways.
We just get the mic more.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I knocked it a little bit away from my mouth when I was trying to get this computer in the right place.
Yeah, the scene of Mickey talking talking Chinese is one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Mickey talking China.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was a really good one. Okay, here's another one. This one's from Annabelle, who says, greetings here, Jose from Puerto Rico. I guess it's from Jose. The email was Annabelle. Anyways, greetings, Jose here from Puerto Rico. Congratulations for everything you do. Your content is the best in all the internet.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you. I read your most recent article in Medium about South Park, and it is excellent. I write mainly because I would like to know your opinion about Randy's radicalization in the first 2 episodes of the season. First, he commits terrorist acts like the Joker, and then kills Winnie the Pooh in the style of Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men. Randy is... We actually got a couple of emails to that effect. Randy has always been characterized by his impulsiveness and obsession with achieving certain things, such as the record for the biggest piece of crap or cheating Stan's toy car to win a race. But I don't remember him acting so violently to achieve a goal. It is as if you're becoming a sociopath. In my opinion, the common factor for his actions is greed and their goal of transforming Integrity Farms into a large corporation. My impression is that he has become an allegory for wild capitalism, a capitalism that in essence does not differ so much from China's dictatorial communism that was satirized in the last episode. It'd be interesting to know your impressions about it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say it's interesting because I could have seen this season going a very different way where they like doubled down on Randy as a sociopath and they very much kind of backtracked from that in this episode, which was a little bit less narratively enjoyable, but it did allow for that great, fuck China moment. So
I saw it as, because I also was worried. I was like, is Randy really becoming a fucking serial killer before my eyes right now? But I think I took it as like a direct like metaphor for these corporations that quote unquote have blood on their hands. You know, if you're dealing with the Chinese government and you're just trying to make a buck over there, but there's also it's going to concentration camps and these nefarious, human rights violations, like, is that on you too? I think that's kind of what they're trying to get at. But yeah, it was weird from a character point of view for sure.
Yeah, I also kind of like the idea, and I don't know if I probably don't agree with this as like a broader political idea, of the idea of Randy being the idea of like modern capitalism, like embodied in a guy, and like trying to fix itself and become better and become what it's supposed to be. I think is an interesting way to like look at the world as such, that like if you assume capitalism works, you can kind of also agree that like the status quo version of it's not so good.
for sure.
And that like there's a fixable version, and putting Randy in that position is I think an interesting choice. We have a bunch more. We got a lot of emails, by the way. This isn't even, I have like 7 or 8 in the document, and that's not even close to all of
Let's
them.
just do 1 or 2 more.
Okay, cool. This one's interesting. It says, one says, "Hi gang, I've listened to the podcast the last 2 seasons, and I'm happy that you're back for another year. Here's my take on the last 2 episodes. It might be really, really far off. South Park, the show, is now Tegrity Farms. So what does Tegrity Weed represent on the show? Trey and Matt are widely viewed as an uncompromising duo, and they prove it yet again with this episode, thus having a whole lot of integrity and respect for their cutting-edge humor and no bullshit attitude. At the same time, like Randy in the show, Trey and Matt have commodified this integrity through the years, becoming filthy rich in the process by selling the rights to the show across the world and making huge successful video games, Cartman plushies, and Tally Towels, also an award-winning musical. Maybe they do feel a bit like sellouts are becoming super rich and important by doing fart jokes for 22 years. Maybe they want to get out of this fucking farm, like Stan, and start a deathcore band. I wish they would make this season as abrasive and relentless as Crimson Dawn's performance in the last episode. One last note, I read and heard that a lot of people thought the episode was not funny and kind of preachy despite making good points. In a world where that is getting more South Park-esque by the hour, we don't deserve funny South Park, we deserve preachy South Park, and I think we'll all be better for it. Wow, I babbled on. Sorry for the long post. English is not my first language. Sorry about that too. Cheers from Corsica, Lysandru. So what do you guys think, especially on that last part about preachy versus funny South Park?
I mean, my favorite is when it's both. I would agree that I probably
too.
didn't laugh very much at the Communist China episode, but if I had to choose between the two, I don't know. I'm just somebody who's kind of has a high tolerance in terms of I'm not someone who usually laughs at things, so I would rather take the commentary just because it's something interesting to chew on. But obviously, I'd rather have both. But as far as the first point about them being sellouts, I've thought about this too, but my thing is that I don't think anything has happened recently. It's not like South Park is all of a sudden the most popular thing in the world. It's probably less popular than it probably ever has been, in the sense that when it first came out, I mean, everybody knew about it, and it was the biggest thing in the world. So I'm having a hard time really seeing how they all of a sudden feel like sellouts, because I don't really see any big shift that's happened.
I mean, do we think that, like, and I don't know if I buy this or not, this is just a throwing an idea out there, like, do you think that maybe some of, like, the digital sort of monetization and, like, digital merchandising that they've been doing maybe speaks to that with, like, all the video games and all the different online stuff?
Especially their mobile game
Right,
after their microtransactions episode. I mean, maybe. I feel like if that was the case, they'd probably be more specific about it. Because I don't really think that Tegrity Weed or the $300,000 really, there's no evidence that translates into them making money over mobile versus merchandising versus their musical. Yeah, I just don't see it. And I also just think that back in the day, in the early 2000s, when everyone in the world knew what South Park is, I still think they were making more money back then. How could they not have?
Sure.
No way, dude. They're making more money now.
Because of all the merchandising?
Just because of like contracts over time, just accumulate more
Yeah.
money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're getting a bigger and bigger chunk probably every time that they need to renegotiate. They're like, all right, I'm going to only do this if I get like way more on the back end. I bet you. I mean, I get what you're saying, but money wise, I think they're doing way better now.
So do you think that most of the Integrity Farms thing is about them feeling like sellouts and their integrity?
Yeah, I think that it really just serves whatever purpose the episode at that time is trying to do. But yeah, I think that right now it is kind of a placeholder for the show in a way, also kind of a placeholder for businesses in a way, also kind of a placeholder for people who hate South Park in a way and want to get out of it. And just people. Yeah, it's everything. It's South Park, man. I don't think that it's a 1-to-1.
Yeah. Just on this question of like how much they feel like sellouts or how self-aware that it might actually be that is a part of it. Because I just did a little quick research and realized that the company that owns Comedy Central and owns South Park, Viacom, does do a bunch of business with China, and is kind of grounded there. And so I think that
Of course they do.
Yeah, I mean for sure. But got to double check these things. And they actually have been backing up South Park on this stuff, but I think that maybe there's a point where they were like, man, I can't believe we are also one of these businesses that is getting all this China money, and like we should say something about it. So I think maybe there is a part of like selling out or like ethical compromising that like they didn't feel comfortable with, and that they're trying to deal with this like sort of newer approach to this stuff with China and whatnot.
Well, I mean, that is a part of the meta-ness. I mean, they are this like, transgressive, edgy voice in America that's owned by a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, that really, they did get censored in the Muhammad episode, straight up, by the corporation that they work for. So they don't have the final word. I mean, I guess, yeah, you can probably reach a meta conclusion to that.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it almost feels like they were just like, let's see what Viacom will do if we say fuck China. And Viacom reacted better than Blizzard or the NBA did. So shouts out to Viacom, I guess.
Yeah.
Good job, Viacom.
I mean, luckily China's not, or I guess luckily, I don't know, but China's not saying we're cutting off all business ties with all Viacom properties, just specifically South Park.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
Yeah, maybe it's an easier bet than them being like, we're not streaming the NBA anymore, because that's tens of millions of dollars.
I don't know the specifics, but I do think that Matt and Trey and South Park Studios have a relative degree of autonomy versus other shows.
Yeah, totally. I just think that the funding comes
from... But they still don't own it, though.
Yeah, and the funding...
Trey doesn't own South Park, or does he? I don't know.
No,
I don't
think
so.
They do not.
And then the funding for it also all comes from Viacom and stuff, so...
Right.
Okay, and then if we want to do one more question, if we have time, I can pull one up really fast. This one's interesting. This one's from Jersey in Poland, who says, "Greetings from Poland. Love your show, and I'm so glad that I have my favorite podcast to listen to on my way to work. I'm reading the book In America, Travels with Steinbeck by Gert Mock, who in 2010 travels along the route of John Steinbeck during his time of writing Travels with Charlie. Mock talks a lot about the fall of suburban areas and small towns, and also the rise of social stratification of American society and the crisis of the middle class. He pairs this phenomenon with the weakening of the American town communities. Young people are moving to cities to find work while their parents and grandparents are staying in half-abandoned towns. What really got me thinking is the scene of Autumn Fest portrayed in South Park. Are these kinds of social gatherings still viable or visible widely across America, or is it the case of richer states like Colorado where the middle class is still on the rise? Also, during the scene, there is the whole vibe of American suburbs mixed with Scandinavian lifestyle, Stan being a privileged, depressed rebel kid from an economically stable family who tries to manifest his feelings using metal music, a genre widely popular in Northern Europe. What do you guys think?" From Jersey. Just about like the collapse of, do you think that there's anything to this idea of like the collapse of the American town, and getting out of South Park itself, that like towns don't matter in the same way they used to? Or like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, there is, demographically speaking, absolutely, kids are totally moving out of towns and going to urban areas. That's why you have this kind of weird electoral college unbalance, honestly. You have fucking billions of people living in small concentrated places, and then
right, like then there's 15 people in Wyoming who get to decide the president.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I just thought this was interesting because it's an interesting way to think about the difference between South Park, the show, and like real life, in the sense of like, I don't think, are there like towns that do like cool fall festivals anymore? I wouldn't know. I don't live
Oh yeah,
cities.
totally. Oktoberfest in Memphis, baby. It's a big thing.
Well, there you are. But yeah, I mean, we have a bunch more, but thanks everyone for emailing in.
Yeah.
We're trying to get to the other, I just want to say really quick, thank you to everyone who emailed to mention that Crimson Dawn is a lot like Red Dawn, just swap in the Chinese for the North Koreans or whatever.
Yeah.
We got like 55 emails on that, so I didn't read one of them specifically, but thanks to everyone who sent that in.
Yeah.
That's a fun little observation.
Yeah. Where can we find you guys on the internet? Go for it, Lux.
Sure. I'm at ML Surfboard on Twitter. There's a podcast called the Game Boys Podcast. Jared's on it sometimes. You can listen to that, and you can look up
It's
Party
good.
World. Thank you. And you can look up Party World Wrestling on Facebook to come see my cool wrestling show that I like to do.
That's good too.
Thanks, Ryan. Where can we find you on the internet?
I make comedy shorts every week on Ryan Shorts on YouTube and Facebook, baby. And we got Tegrity over there at Ryan Shorts. So just come on down.
Those are good also.
You can tweet at me at Amanda Shirker or read my articles on our Medium.
Yeah, medium.com/wisecrack. We also, Amanda did an awesome article on the China episode you guys should definitely check out.
It's really good also.
Thanks.
All right, guys, until next time.
Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Peace.